Hey guys, we're back with the notes for 3.10. Today we're going to be writing equations using point-slope form. So just like graphing y equals mx plus b is kind of one of the biggest topics in this unit, learning how to take a slope and a point, or sometimes 2 points, and turn them into the original equation is the second biggest counterpart. So we want to be able to make equations given certain pieces of information. Okay? So if you would, I'm going to zoom out for just a second. Will you copy what's on this page? And then press play. Perfect. All right, so if you would like to use the colors, obviously you can do that. If you're fine with just rolling with me, that's fine too. Okay, so let's talk about the two things that we need to know in order to write an equation. In general, I should always be looking for my m and b. In this case, if we're using point-slope form, I'm going to change this right here. I'm going to say in order to use point-slope form, we need an m and 1 point. Okay, if we had m and b, we'd be able to go straight to an answer, like the first example. First example says, write an equation of a line with a slope of -4, so that's my m, that passes through the y-axis, that's my y-intercept, at -2. We know already that that would be y equals a -4x minus 2. We would just plug our m and b straight into our equation. Okay, every other problem that we're dealing with today is not going to have the y-intercept, okay? You're going to be given the slope and then at least 1 point that it goes through. So let's look at how we would do that. All right, down here at the bottom, if you're given the slope and 1 point, this one says write the equation of a line with a slope of 2/3. So I'm going to say my slope, my m, is 2/3. That passes through the point 3, -2. Remember that my x is the first number, that's my 3. The y is the second number. That's my -2. So these are going to be the steps that you're going to use every single time in order to make the equation. The good news is if you follow these instructions, it will spit you out the answer. You won't have to stop and plug stuff back in. It will just solve itself out and give you a final answer. Okay? All right, so do we have to do any work to find the slope? No, we already have that number. So I'm going to put my 2/3 over here. I already have that. Second step is I'm going to plug in my m, my x1, and my y1. Notice I'm not plugging them in for x and y because at the very end, that y and that x are going to still be in my equation. They are going to be part of my answer, so I don't want to mess with them. I only want to replace the x1 and y1. So let's write in what we know. I'm going to do y minus my y1 number. So my y number is the -2. Notice that when I plugged it in, I kept the y minus, but I also plugged in a -2. So I have 2 minus signs there, okay? I'm going to keep plugging in equals my slope, which is 2/3, parenthesis x minus, and then my x number, and my x number is that 3. Okay? Keeping the colors just so you guys can still kind of see where I'm at. So I've plugged in all my values. Step number 2 is that anytime I have minus a negative, or minus a negative next to an x or a y, I want to make sure I fix it into a large plus sign. Here's what I do with that. Let me use pink real quick. So over here, if I have this minus a negative, I like to take a big slash and I color through it and make it into a big plus sign. That way I don't forget. So one more time, if you have minus a negative, what I like to do is take a big slash through it and turn it into one big plus sign. That tells me how I can solve it from here on out, okay? All right, let's go to our next step. I'm going to distribute. That means multiply. So if you want to remind yourself, distribute is multiply. I'm going to multiply my m. So 2/3 times x is 2/3 x. 2/3 of a -3. So if I was typing that in the calculator, I would go 2/3 multiplied by a -3. That's how I would type it in. Make sure you take the sign with you. So if I do that, I get -2. I'm going to bring down my equal sign, bring down my y, that big plus sign, and my 2. My last step is that I want to get my y equals. So I want to get y by itself. That means that I'm trying to cancel out this +2 and get the y alone. The opposite of +2 is a -2. Now, that -2 does not have an x with it. So I can put it with the x's. I have to put it with the no x's. Okay? Draw my line across. These guys are gone. They are canceled out. They're bifelicious. So if I bring down what I have, I get to keep the y, get to keep my x. My slope is 2/3. And -2 minus 2 right here, if I put this in a calculator, gives me -4. This is my answer. Okay. If you need to pause that for just a second, make sure you have everything. We're going to go to the next page. Great. Let's look. If you would, go ahead and pause the screen for a second and copy everything that you see for the steps. Again, if you like to do the colors, that's fine. If you're fine without them, also fine. Wonderful. All right, let's start with our example. It says, write an equation of a line that goes through 2, -3. So that's one of my x's, 2 with a -3. And then the other point is 4, 7. So 4 is my other x, 7 is my other y. Now, from this problem, I don't know what slope is. So the first step, if you're given 2 points, is that I have to find my slope. Let's go ahead and plug in my pieces. So y2, 7, minus y1, which is a -3. Notice I have minus a negative again. Over my x2, 4, minus my x1, which is 2. If I solve this out and type the whole thing in my calculator, I should get a slope of 5. So I'm going to plug this in down here. Again, coloring him blue, my slope is going to be the 5. That's what I'm plugging in. Now, when it comes to plugging in the x and the y, I've been highlighting them yellow. But in this case, you could do yellow or green. I don't care which point you plug in. The rule is, if you're going to plug in these two, this has to be your x and your y, okay? If you're going to plug in these guys, this has to be your x and your y. I can't plug in an x and a y from 2 different points, okay? The -3 and the 4 do not go together, okay? My suggestion is always use the positive options or always use the smallest options. Okay, so if right now I'm having to decide between 2 positive numbers, 4 and 7, or having to deal with a negative, then I'm going to opt for the positives. I'm going to use the yellow ones, okay? So matching up with the yellow, plugging this in. So y minus a 7, that's my y number, equals 5, that's my slope, parentheses x minus 4, that's my x number. So one more time, x, y, and I'm plugging in my m. The steps are going to be the same for these. I'm going to check and make sure I don't have any minus and negative that I need to fix. I don't on this problem because I use the positive numbers. Second thing I'm going to do is look to distribute. So 5 times x is 5x. 5 times a -4 is a -20. So I'm bringing down everybody else. Final step is I want to get the y by itself. So I need to add or subtract to cancel whoever is with the y. The opposite of a -7 is to add 7. And you might need to type this one in a calculator. But if I do -20 plus 7, that's going to give me a -13. So this is my final answer. If you need to pause that for just a second, make sure you have everything written down. We'll go to the bottom. All right, so I'm going to be going a little bit faster through these next guys because I want to make sure that you get to see lots of examples, but I also don't want this video to be forever long, okay? All right, so I'm plugging in my pieces. My slope is 2/3. I already know that. My y1 is a -1. Make sure you see the double negatives here. Plugging in my m, which is 2/3 again, and x minus 6. I'm right away going to change these double negatives to a big old plus sign so I don't forget. Third step is I'm going to distribute these numbers, so 2/3 times x. 2/3 times a -6 gives me a -4. Again, I'm doing that in a calculator. Bring down what I know. I'm trying to get the y by itself, so I'm going to subtract 1 from both sides so I can cancel out that 1. My final answer will be y equals 2/3 x, and then if I do -4 minus 1 in a calculator, I get -5. Final answer. I'll pause at the end of number 2. So on number 2, I don't know my slope, which means I'm going to have to calculate it with my formula. I'm going to do y2 minus y1, so 10 minus 0, and then on the bottom, x2 minus x1. If I simplify that out, my m comes out to be a -2. So this is the slope that I'm going to plug in, and then I get to choose. I could use the green points. I could use the yellow points. Doesn't matter. For me, I don't want the negative, so I'm going to choose the 2, 0. So plugging it in, y minus 0 equals a negative 2, parentheses x minus 2. There's no double negatives. I don't need to fix any. So we're ready to distribute. Negative 2 times x is a negative 2x. Negative times a negative makes a positive, so 2 times 2 is 4. I'm actually kind of lucky on this one, though. I don't have to bring down y minus 0 because y minus 0 is just a y. So guys, this is my answer. I actually don't have anything else to cancel. If I tried to add 0 to both sides, it would give me the exact same thing. Okay, so that is a 2-step problem. No more work. Pause the screen if you need to. Go ahead and go to the next page. Great. Numbers 3 and 4, both of these do have slope with them, so we get to go a little bit quicker. All right, plugging in y minus 5, that's my y number, equals 4, that's my slope, and then x minus 1. There's no minus and negatives. I don't have to fix anything, so I can go straight to distributing. 4 times x is 4x. 4 times a negative 1 is negative 4, and bring down y minus 5 with my equal sign. My goal is to get the y by itself, so we're going to add the 5, that's the opposite, to both sides. And I end up with y equals 4x plus 1. I'll pause at the end of problem 4 so you have time to write it down if you're just listening. Problem number 4, again, I know my slope, so 2/5. But if I plug in this time, I get y minus, and then I have to worry about plugging in this negative 1. So make sure it's y minus a negative 1. 2/5 is my slope, and then x minus a 10 for my x1. I do have a double negative right here. Minus a negative, I'm going to make that into a big old plus sign so I don't forget. Let's distribute. 2/5 times x is 2/5 x. 2/5 of a negative 10, though, is negative 4. Again, I'm putting that in a calculator. I'm just talking it through so you don't have to. Bring down the y plus 1 and my equal sign. We have one more step, canceling out that plus 1. The opposite of a plus 1 is a minus 1. And when he's gone, my answer comes out to be 2/5 of x minus 5. Again, that's negative 4 minus 1. All right, go ahead and pause the screen if you need to on 3 and 4. I'm actually going to show you some shortcuts for the rest of this. Perfect. Okay, so on 5, 6, and 9 and 10, will you guys go ahead and cross off these two? We are not going to do 7 and 8, but I do want you to write shortcut and memorize next to 5, 6, 9, and 10. Okay? Notice there's not a lot of space to solve these, and that's on purpose. I do not want you to do work on these problems. I want you to memorize this. Okay? All right. So let's start with number 5. Number 5, we have already learned that whenever you have an undefined as a slope, that means that you're supposed to use an x equals. We literally have already done these, okay? This came right out of the 3.8 notes, okay? So if I'm supposed to use an x equals, then I choose my x. So my answer should be x equals a negative 4. In that exact same idea, if I'm trying to do number 6, let me move this over here. If I'm supposed to use what for a 0 slope? I'm supposed to use a y equals. So if I have an x and a y point, then I want to choose my y number. My final answer for this one would just be y equals 6. I do not want you to have work for these. I want you to understand that these are shortcuts. Please make the use x equals, use y equals. Make that note. Pause it if you need to. We're going to the bottom 2 questions. All right, if I go to the last 2, and these are the last 2 we're doing, notice on here, there's something special about these. They have the same numbers in them, but not just the same numbers in the same location. So these guys, if I make a note, they have the same y. So my answer would be that the y is always equal to 1. In problem 10, I have the same x. So that would mean that the x is always equal to a negative 4, at least for that problem, right? So if you have same x's, that's a shortcut. Same y's, That's a shortcut. If you missed anything on this page and you need to copy something else, please do that now. Otherwise, we are done for today.